The Secret God in the Forest story. Anuradha Kumar. Picture Piyush Verma. On the day of the Ratha Jatra, the town of Puri by the sea looked festive. Joyous music sounded everywhere, drums beating, cymbals clashing, trumpets blowing. With her grandmother, Priya watched from the terrace as the three chariots of the three gods emerged from the Jagannatha temple. Every year at this time, the gods traveled to the Gundicha temple a short distance away. The chariots moved very slowly, wooden wheels creaking, devotees chanting as they pulled at the ropes. The journey would take the whole day. The little dots of moving color gradually grew into bright cones, looking much like the temple itself. As they took shape, Priya could see Balabhadra's red and green chariot, and Subhadra's red and black one. Their brother Jagannatha's Ratha was red with broad stripes of yellow. On the mat by Priya were the small wooden idols her grandmother had bought for her. They looked just like the ones in the Jagannatha temple. Each had a big square head and short, stubby arms stretching outwards. Their eyes were circles of black inside white and white inside red. Priya knelt on the mat for a closer look. Picking up the idols, she asked her grandmother, These gods look different from other gods, don't they? I smiled. Yes. Some say that's how Jagannatha looked when he lived deep in the forest. Priya ran to I saying, Tell me that story of Jagannatha. Which story of Jagannatha? Asked I. There are so many. That one, where he is the secret god in the forest. Like all such stories, this one too is from long ago, I began, as Priya sat down to listen, eyes shining. In the hilly forests of Odisha live a tribe called the Sabras. Some call them Sora or Sora. The forests and their trees, the clear running streams, give them all they need. Their lives, the Sabras know, depend on the forests. Do they still live in the forests, the Sabras? Priya interrupted. Many of them do, replied I. Now, at the time of our story, they worshipped a god called Nilamadhaba. His huge stone idol stood deep in a forest, in a secret grove. Only the Sabras knew where it was. Nilamadhaba had a big square face, large eyes that saw everything, and short, stubby arms that stretched outwards. He rose like a pillar, like the trees. Sometimes, when the light was just right, he looked as blue as the hills around. The sounds of drums and cymbals had grown louder, but I and Priya were in the quiet forest of the Sabras, far back in time. This was also the time when the king Indradyumna ruled over a large kingdom, close to where the Sabras lived. When he heard about this huge stone god in a secret grove, the king was curious. So he sent Vidyapati, his trusted minister, to find out more. Vidyapati reached the Sabra kingdom and was welcomed by Biswabasu, the Sabra chief. Vidyapati tried to ask Biswabasu in every manner possible, but he refused to reveal anything about Nilamadhaba. But then, Vidyapati was a clever and patient young man. He stayed in the Sabra kingdom for many months and even married Biswabasu's daughter Lalita. It was she who persuaded her father to take Vidyapati to the secret grove. Viswabasu finally agreed, but he placed a blindfold over Vidyapati's eyes. The clever Vidyapati scattered mustard seeds behind him as he followed the king to the grove. "We'll soon see why he did that," said I, as Priya's eyes rounded in excitement. Vidyapati felt the thick forest grass tickle his feet, and looming branches brushed his face. They seemed to be walking on, and Vidyapati felt the forest becoming more and more silent. The only sound was of their feet and the sudden call of a bird. Then Viswabasu held his hand to stop him, and took his blindfold off. As he looked up, Vidyapati held his breath. Nilamadhaba was just as he had been described, but like no god Vidyapati had seen before. He rose like a huge pillar, like the trees around. He had a big square face, large eyes that saw everything, and short, stubby arms that stretched outwards. As the sun flashed through the trees, the stone idol changed color. Nilamadhaba turned from a smoky grey to a deep blue. Time passed. Vidyapati had to leave, for he knew that King Indradyumna waited for him. He promised Viswabasu and Lalita that he would be back soon. He did return very soon, but with him was Indradyumna. The king couldn't wait to see for himself the secret god of the Sabras. "By now the mustard seeds had sprouted," said I, as Vidyapati knew they would. He had only to follow the bright trail of yellow flowers to take his king to the secret grove. Before they could enter the forest, however, the Sabra chief arrived there with his men. Viswabasu had heard about Indradyumna's presence and, as was the custom, had come to greet a visiting king. "I have come to take your Nilamadhaba," Indradyumna declared. "He will be worshipped at a special temple in my kingdom." There was a stunned silence. Vidyapati rushed forward to explain to Indradyumna that Nilamadhaba belonged to the Sabras. They had been worshipping him for thousands of years. He was their king, their god, I said to Priya. But the king didn't care about what Vidyapati said. He stormed into the forest, all the way to the grove. And what did he see? The idol had disappeared. The forest felt empty. Even the birds and animals had fallen silent. The king realized he had been punished for his arrogance. Nilamadhaba had refused to fall into his hands. A thoughtful Indradyumna returned to his kingdom. He spent all his days in prayer asking the god for forgiveness. Then one night, said I, Indradyumna had a most unusual dream. Nilamadhaba appeared and said to him, "Indradyumna, a log of wood will come floating down to where the river joins the sea. Have your men take the sacred log and use it to carve images that look like me and place them in a new temple." The god also instructed that Viswabasu's family, and later his descendants, would perform special rituals in that temple. Indradyumna did see a log floating down the river to the sea. He had it brought to his palace and 3 idols carved out of it. They were made to look like Nilamadhaba, as the king had seen in his dream. They had big square faces, large eyes that saw everything, and short, stubby arms that stretched outwards. The king had a grand temple built and the idols placed in it, just as he had been told. So what happened to Nilamadhaba? Asked Priya. He is still the god of the Sabras. Their Nilamadhaba is our Jagannatha. He belongs to everyone, I said softly. See. She pointed out to the road, where the chariots were still moving slowly and becoming smaller and smaller. The Rathas are pulled by rich and poor, everyone. But how did that one Nilamadhaba idol become three idols of Jagannatha, Subhadra and Balabhadra? Priya asked long after I had fallen silent. I smiled. Now that's a story for another day.